Next slide, please. Welcome, and thank you for joining us today for this webinar as part of COP27 hosted by the European Union towards a net positive fashion industry by 2050, setting ambitious targets and inspiring leaders. My name is Federica Marchioni, and I'm the CEO of Global Fashion Agenda, a nonprofit organization that originated at COP15 in Copenhagen in 2009. We have a vision of a net positive fashion industry, an industry that gives more back to society, the natural world, and the economy that it takes out. We work to achieve that by convening, communicating, connecting, innovating solution, inspiring and mobilizing action. Since our inception, the industry has come a long way, and sustainability has been placed as a strategic priorities among fashion businesses. And despite many brands, retailer and manufacturing taking positive steps and many supportive policies are on the horizon, the current pace of transformation is too slow. We are living in a humanitarian and environmental crisis, yet we are producing and using more than ever before. Fashion must urgently transform its business model, and today we will be announcing a new exciting consultation that we urge you all to participate in, so we can establish a holistic route of travel that encompasses both environmental and social sustainability to protect our future and the future of generations to come. Before sharing a short video to introduce this initiative to you, I'm honored to hand the word to our new partners, Elisa Tonda, the Chief Resources and Market Branch at the United Nations Environment Programme.
Thank you very much, Federica, and thanks for having put on the table already the exciting opportunities towards which we're heading together. And good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all of you who are connected today to this session and who have made the time to be with us today. And a very deep thank also to the European Union, who has made available to us the platform to be able to exchange with you on this very important subject, as well as for the long-standing support that the European Union has been providing to UNEP's work on building sustainability and circularity across the textile value chain. In the sector on which we're going to concentrate today, the textile and fashion sector is one really of global and strategic importance, as it provides high level of employment, it provides high level of foreign exchange revenue, it provides products that are essential to human welfare. But as you know, it's also a sector on which there has been very important conversation around opportunities that we might tap on to address the social and environmental impacts. And those environmental impacts are very much around those that we're referring to when we're talking about the environmental planetary crisis, the one of climate very much on the agenda these days, the one of nature and the one of pollution and waste. And ultimately, where we think the opportunity should be sought in terms of addressing those planetary environmental crises are very much around transforming the way in which we produce and we consume it. And no sector, no value chain can be a better testimony of the potential of doing that than the sector on which we're going to be concentrating today. This is very much where UNEP has been focusing its attention on how we can transform into an opportunity the way in which we bring sustainable consumption and production and circularity at the core of sector that has a high impact potential, such as the textile sector. And this has been the focus of our attention when really understanding What are the scientific foundation that would be driving our work going forward? Most of which will be reflected in an upcoming report that will go under the title of Sustainability and Circularity in the Textile Value Chain, a Global Roadmap, that has helped us identify priorities and actions to really transform that value chain to sustainability and to circularity. A work that has been inspired by the collaboration with a very broad community of 120 experts across different constituencies that have helped us really to understand what is the pathway, what is the trajectory that will help us address the environmental and social impact that are associated with this sector. And this is very much where our collaboration with the Global Fashion Agenda comes into play. How we can put for ourselves milestone and target in addressing the transformation, in unfolding this pathway. Because we're all very aware, and you will tell me much more clearly that I can say, that there are a lot of individuals' ambitious goals that have been set in the context of initiatives, in the context of partnerships, but the way in which they have triggered the deep transformation that we need for this sector is probably perceived by all of us as insufficient. We might be referring to challenges related to the scale that they have triggered, the fact that the value chain is not as transparent as we might want it to look so, the fact that it's at times difficult to bring together the different stakeholders in this value chain, or the fact that there is fragmentation in the way in which we are measuring success and the progress that we are achieving in this value chain. Well, this is precisely what has triggered this collaboration that we are announcing today of the UN Environment Programme and the Global Fashion Agenda, of really joining hands to think together, and with your input, how that collaborative target setting and that bringing together of different stakeholders should look like, and how we could be measuring the progress and the transformation across the textile value chain, and therefore how we can measure how we have addressed the environmental planetary crisis, as well as other crises and challenges Federica was alluding to in her introduction. Federica, I'm going to hand the floor back to you to take this very interesting session forward.
Thank you very much, Elisa. And seeing your smile despite of the challenges make me feel that we're both still optimistic, because we can still make it so to the 1.5 degree pathways. So towards a net positive fashion industry is the title of our video, which I would like then to kick off and share with you all.
The fashion and textiles industry employs an estimated 300 million people and generates tremendous economic value around the world. Fashion influences human culture. It inspires identity, values, and action for billions of people across all segments of society. However, the industry still faces significant challenges. In many cases, workers are exposed to dangerous working conditions, long working hours, precarious contractual agreements, and inadequate pay. What's more, the industry is dependent on raw materials, land, natural resources, energy, and chemicals to make products. And as demand grows, so does strain on ecosystems. This is also driven by consumption patterns. While clothing production doubled between 2000 and 2015, utilization of clothing decreased by 36% during the same period. Despite many companies taking positive steps to improve their practices and many supportive policies on the horizon, the current pace of transformation is too slow. Furthermore, much of the industry's progress is led by a select group of visible actors, while the remainder of the industry conducts business as usual out of the public eye. Fashion must urgently transform current practices to protect our future and the future of generations to come. With a vision of a net positive fashion industry which gives more to society, the natural world, and the economy than it takes out, the Fashion CEO agenda highlights the imperative need for a holistic approach addressing both environmental and social sustainability of the industry with 5 priorities. Respectful and secure work environments, better wage systems, resource stewardship, smart material choices, and circular systems, guiding fashion's leaders on where to take action. But to accelerate progress and drive accountability in these areas, we need clear industry-aligned targets. GFA and UNEP present the Fashion Industry Target Consultation. Global Fashion Agenda and the United Nations Environment Programme are embarking on a joint consultation to accelerate progress. Together, we are calling upon all fashion and textile value chain actors to participate in an industry-wide global consultation to shape directional industry targets for a net positive industry that will be included in the Fashion CEO agenda. The consultation seeks to identify and converge existing targets, as well as formulate new targets where they are currently missing, to provide an industry-aligned route of travel and drive greater accountability. This consultation will help the textile sector understand the state of current progress, what it should still strive to achieve, and by when. We invite all stakeholder voices across the entire value chain, from all regions. Your insights are key. To share your views through our online survey and regional workshops, head to globalfashion-agenda.org/fashion-industry-target-consultation/. Only together can we bring about a net positive fashion industry, and you can help to shape that course of change today.
Next slide, please. So we will now start our talk show, and I'm delighted to introduce Anand Anuya, Head of Organizational Development of Sahi Export, Hendrik Alpen, Head of Sustainability Engagement at H&M Group. Thank you for joining us today. And let me start by asking Hendrik, why do we need a holistic sustainability approach that includes both social and environmental impact areas? And can you give example on your organization and how your organization is working on both?
Thanks, Federica. First of all, thanks for having me, and for everyone joining us in this conversation. I think you described it already really well in the video. We have impacts across the value chain in our industry towards the environment and towards people, obviously. There's a lot of jobs linked to our industry. There's a lot of livelihoods depending on our industry. At the same time, we see also still a great need to accelerate reductions of environmental impacts. But we will not succeed with that against people and at the cost of people's livelihood. So we need to bring these two things together. On the other hand, also the consequences we're facing, the consequences of climate change will affect people, obviously. And it will affect many of those people that are currently actually part of our value chain, maybe in the harshest and most severe way. So we have to bring those two parts together and not see them as a contradiction to each other or even as an alternative towards each other. They belong together. In the end, we're talking about, later on as well, ecosystems and nature as a context where everything is connected to each other. And in an ecosystem, if you change one part or remove one part, the system may collapse. So we need to look at it holistically. And I think the CEO Fashion Agenda is a great start for that.
Thank you, Hendrik. And Anand, how about your organization?
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much. So Shahi is a large garment manufacturer. We're a manufacturing partner for brands such as H&M. And what that means is, we are a labor-intensive company. We employ over 120,000 people, mostly women from low-income backgrounds. And so for Shahi and manufacturers like us, livelihoods and well-being of people is core to our business. Unlike environmental issues, social issues can be hard to address and measure. But even though that's the case, we still have to work on them. And there are definitely tools out there to help us do that. I think in many cases, social and environmental issues can be interrelated, so we can't always separate the two. We talk a lot about, climate mitigation, and India as a country where Shahi is based experiences, extreme heat waves. This directly impacts employees, right? It can affect working conditions. It can affect other aspects of the job as well. So just to talk a little bit about, some of the things that Shahi's done on both the environmental and social side, we have actually achieved 70% renewable electricity. And we've done this by installing 80 plus megawatts of solar and wind energy. This has led to 63% reduction in scope 2 emissions since 2016. We're targeting achieving 100% renewable electricity. At the same time, we're working on a transition to carbon neutral energy by switching out coal-fired boilers and opting for biomass. We have other interventions on the environmental side, and similarly on the social side for our large workforce. We invest in their well-being through programs on soft skills, protecting human rights, community development, and of course, health. So I'd be happy to get into that, as we go further in our discussion today.
We will for sure. Thank you very much both for this first question. And now starting with you, Anand, the 1.5 degree pathways requires that fashion industry to reduce its emission by over 50% in less than 8 years. This is an ambition but urgent target. And how can we establish similar targets for other environmental impact areas such as the freshwater, chemicals management, and nature? And what could this look like for social topics such as wages, equality, and diversity in purchasing practices?
Yeah, that's a great question. I talked a little bit about what Shahi's done on the energy and electricity side of things. For water, we have been able to achieve a level of having 74% of our water requirement coming from recycled sources. So there are definitely possibilities in what can be achieved. But at the same time, I would say that both environmental and social targets do need to be contextualized to the region that you're operating in. And I would say that they need to be backed by evidence and research. There's growing consensus on the environmental side that targets can't be absolute. Every country, or even state in some cases, kind of needs to set its own targets. For decarbonization, there are strong support systems, and policies in India compared to other countries. And like I said, even within India, different states can have more favorable policies. And then when you come to social issues, different regions can face different challenges. For example, in India, as I mentioned, Shahi employs largely a female workforce. And here we see that some of the highest rates of anemia or iron deficiency among women. So as a health issue, one of the things that Shahi's considering is, can we eradicate anemia among our workforce? Is this possible? So I guess all of this is just to say that, as we study these topics, especially the social ones that maybe haven't been studied as much, I think we will understand what is possible depending on, the structural challenges that may exist in different regions. And I think based on that, we can definitely begin to look at targets or target setting. I think this will obviously require, as I mentioned, studying and experimenting. I think it will require collaboration between different, stakeholders in the value chain, between brands, between manufacturers, to really look at what this means in terms of, even our business models.
Thank you, Anand. And Enric, would you like to chime in on this question as well?
Yes, would love to. So for H&M Group, we have set a science-based target to reduce carbon emission across scope 1, 2, and 3 by actually more than 50, exactly 56% until 2030. And this is also the area where we have a industry, or not even an industry, a global alignment of how we measure and a clear guidance towards the targets that we need to collectively achieve. It allows us to have a different kind of conversation where we speak a common language. So we've come quite a far way on climate in terms of creating this universal common target where each of us has to make serious contributions towards. But we know what we compare and what we need to strive for to reach the 1.5 degree threshold. So as you mentioned in your intro, that looks a little bit different for many, many other areas. There's a lot of work going on. For us, I mean, social has been the starting point for all our work. We've set multiple targets in the social area, and a lot of work and investment is going into it. We have a dedicated water roadmap, for example. We're targeting reduction of freshwater use reductions of 10% by 2025 compared to 2022 in our supply chain. Actually, exactly as you say, Anand, apply a regional filter on it, because we need to contextualize especially freshwater use to regional circumstances. But in these other areas, we have not come that far yet that we can speak really a common language, that there is a common framework that we can lean towards. It shouldn't stop us from doing the right things. And in many cases, we will see the low-hanging fruits and a lot of things that we can do individually. But moving towards a common direction will help us achieve greater impact together. So there's a lot of ongoing work in that area. For example, there's work towards defining science-based targets also for biodiversity and nature. But it is complex. It took us many, many years to get to science-based targets for climate. And that's where we have loads of research behind. So we need to find those common grounds and the things that are available today that we maybe need to improve that can steer us into a common direction. At the same time, we need to be careful to not set KPIs or targets that lock us into things that might have reverse and unintended consequences, but at least that give us a common language and a common direction to work towards. And we have a couple of tools there. For example, when we look at social conditions in the supply chain, we have the SAC FSLM tool, for example, and SLCP that allows us to measure performance in factories and management systems in factories on common terms. So we have a couple of things there, but I think we need someone to bring us further together on a common journey. And I think with the priorities set out so far in the Fashion CEO agenda, that's where we have a common ground, a clear case for why we need to focus on these priorities, looking at how we can set targets that unite us again behind a common purpose, I think is a logical next step, actually.
Yes, a lot to do for those priorities indeed. And my next question is, where do you currently identify gaps in the target setting? It is necessary to establish an aligned route of travel, as we're keeping saying, for the industry, or do individual actions suffice? And if we do need alignment, what is the needed to achieve that? Hendrik.
Who do you want to go first? Yes. I mean, yeah, as I mentioned already, I think especially biodiversity and nature is an area where we need a continued process of bringing really all our heads, knowledge, insights, research together to develop a science-based target framework. That's work that is ongoing. That is something we need to continue. At the same time, I think there is an existing level of different goals and targets within the industry already across all the different areas. So we have targets on water, for example. We have targets on chemicals. We have targets on social issues as well. So I think it's a probably good enough first step to fine-tune the slight differences in those targets that we already have existing in the industry to find a common agreement around them, because we are to a large extent already working on the same areas. We might measure slightly differently, and we have some gaps in data. That is true. Some of that we will not be able to fill completely. It will still be a big challenge to measure social impacts, for example, versus the frameworks that we have already today to measure carbon emissions. But where we have a gap of data, we can at least operate with the best available gut feeling, I would say, and focus on the areas that we have identified and processes that guide us in that, like, for example, human rights due diligence processes, identifying salient human rights, and ensuring ensuring living up to the commitments and requirements we have around human rights, for example.
Anand.
Yeah,
Please.
thank you. Well, I think Hendrik talked a lot about environmental targets and the progress that's been made on that. Clearly, social targets have their own challenges when it comes to things such as measurement. One of the ways that Shahi's been able to address this is we have partnered with research organizations, and we've learned that, for example, in the field of development economics, there are ways to measure social impacts, for example, randomized controlled trial evaluations. And these tools, these research tools, can be used to really guide our knowledge and understanding on different topics. So let's take, perhaps one of the most challenging topics, wages. At Shahi, we pay legal minimum wages across all our factories. We have a large population, as I mentioned, 120,000 full-time workers. As a manufacturer, you could say that 30% of our total cost is just wages. So any changes to wages impacts the business in a large way. And most firms in the manufacturing sector, and in this industry at least, they do operate on slim margins. So that becomes a challenge when you ask companies to say, let's pay higher wages, or it's not clear how that could be done. But there could be ways to experiment where you can increase wages, in this experimental setting, and really assess the sustainability for a manufacturer, for example, to pay higher wages. Maybe you can determine that, look, currently manufacturers are paying minimum wage, but there's a business case to pay slightly higher than that, and that gets us a bit closer to the living wage. Then you could determine that, okay, now there's still a gap. How do we close that gap? Is it through higher prices? Is it through, where do you pass those costs on to? So I think similar to what we've done on the environmental side, there's been a very evidence-based, science-based approach, as we've talked about. We can do the same on the social side, but you still will need to contextualize. And I do think that we'll have to document impact, and then really just scale the proven solutions. So I think, we can acknowledge the diversity and variance in these challenges, and then use that approach to eventually solve them, in different parts of the world.
Very good. Thank you very much. And now even a broader question, because established global brands are often cited for their commitments or lack thereof to sustainability in trade media. And it estimated that 50% of the industry, which is less visible to the broader public, isn't currently acting on sustainability at all. So how can we support all actors in taking action, from the SMEs to the multinational and spinning mills to online retailers? Maybe, again, I would like to start this question with Hendrik this time.
Yes, I would say you're totally right. And, there are a lot of things that we can contribute as a, big company, also with significant resources, where we've also taken the conscious decision to, sometimes go a step ahead, try out things also, you know, stick our neck out too far, maybe a little bit here and there. We've been trialing a lot on the wage question, for example. We have a lot of data that we can share. We have a lot of insights into what's been working, what does not work, and a lot of insights into what kind of different purchasing practices have an effect, for example. So that's things we publish today. We publish the data of wages across all our sourcing markets, just as we publish, for example, experiences in transitioning to more sustainable materials. And also that's where we as a big brand can go ahead, maybe invest in research, you know, lift certain new materials to market scale. That also means then, though, as a consequence, if you're an SME today, there are a lot of first steps readily available that you can just pull off the shelf. So you don't have to go into all the complexity of developing science-based targets in the first step. You can start with looking at the materials you're using. There's LCA data out there. There's certification out there. It's honestly not that hard. You can just talk to your supplier. They will have a lot of solutions readily available for you. And you don't have to strive for perfection. If 50% of the business of the industry in SMEs would take a first step into switching from conventional materials into more sustainable materials, we would have a significant reduction of carbon emissions in our industry. That's, you know, a very easy step to take. Doesn't even require you much change, no research development. It's all there, and you can see how it works in the market. Even you don't have to face any risks there, actually. And from there, you can go into the next steps, and you can talk to your supply chain about the efforts they are probably already taking when it comes to decarbonization. Many suppliers, I'm sure, Anand, you can talk to that as well. You mentioned in the beginning already, have already made investments into, for example, developing their own energy sources, investing in renewable sources for energy, investing in new production processes, moving away from old dyeing techniques, washing techniques, and so on. So these are things you can get from your supply chain. And then maybe as a bigger company, we can contribute to that again from the other end. We're providing some 500 million euros as investment capital to our supply chain to invest into decarbonization. And the return of investment for us is basically emission reductions. But literally anyone can participate on that. If you source from the same suppliers, I don't want to open a box of competition about the supply chain capacity here, but if you source from the same suppliers, you can basically benefit from that. It's a present from us, so to say, to the industry, but of course also to ourselves. So there's a lot. Long story short, there's a lot you can tap into as an SME that has been developed already, either as best practice, existing partnerships and initiatives that don't take big efforts for you to take the first steps.
So to summarize, sustainability, it's not easy, but it's not that hard to start. So that is your opinion. What about Anand?
Yeah, I guess one message I definitely want to convey is that I don't think that it's helpful to assume the intention of a company is not to be sustainable, whether it's a small or medium enterprise, whether it's a multinational or a spinning mill. I think that there are forces and structural challenges that can determine the outcomes that we see, regardless of what type of company we're talking about. As Hendrik mentioned, Shahi has been able to make a lot of progress when it comes to renewable electricity. 70% of our electricity is from renewable sources. And the reason we've been able to do that, we sort of leaped ahead in just a short amount of time because one of the states in which we operate here in India, the government had offered a policy that allowed us to make this investment and make the business case for it. So I think that's super important, and that can determine the outcomes. So we definitely need a lot of alignment there. I think sometimes, again, speaking from a supplier or manufacturer point of view, sometimes there can be a lack of incentives through the supply chain to act sustainably. So for example, if a customer is determining sourcing decisions primarily just on price rather than on, other sustainable investments the company makes, then the company may not have the case to make these, investments. So I think that's an important factor. And I do think that, it can be important to see the business case for sustainable investments. Oftentimes, there are ways to prioritize sustainability and still grow as a company. I think we just need to, have that information, have that knowledge sharing, share best practices, and so on.
Absolutely. Sharing best practice, improve the cases, but pragmatically, and I'm going to stay with you for this last question, Anand.
Yeah.
Why it is important for brand and manufacturer to collaborate in sustainability strategy setting, and what are criteria for successful collaboration?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's important to collaborate on these strategies because sustainability is an issue that relies on many stakeholders. It depends on the entire supply chain, the entire industry. I think that transactional business relationships can be a barrier to achieving these goals. And without a collaborative approach, I don't think we can really solve the larger industry issues. And then I think the criteria, I would say mindset matters. We do need to see trust. So seeing each other as value-adding partners, not seeing suppliers simply as contract manufacturers. I think, Hendrik mentioned this already, but there is a lot of answers that you could get from talking to your supply chain partners. They're the ones on the ground. When it comes to social issues, for example, they're the ones interacting with workers, seeing what's happening, and, have the most ability to kind of innovate. When it comes to environmental issues, I think oftentimes, if you have a solution, you do need to understand how that solution can be implemented in the supply chain, whether that means, practically speaking, or what the business model is. I think proactive communication from both sides. When we see Shahi's customers sharing their long-term vision, their strategy, as we often see with partners like H&M, that allows us to be more proactive in finding solutions to these challenges. We obviously employ a bunch of the resources, both human and environmental. So then seeing what's ahead allows us to really be more strategic. And I think in the future, we could definitely even look at models of co-investment, joint ventures, longer term commitment. So yeah, these are some things that come to mind from my side.
Thank you, Anand. And Hendrik, you want to close this?
Yeah, we could continue that conversation for quite a while, I suppose. No, but I think you mentioned some important points already. Maybe just looking back at history, where we started out with sustainability requirements on suppliers. That's been the starting point for sustainability in our industry back for us in the mid-90s. Then you establish control systems, but they only get you this far. So I think we had to learn some good almost 20 years ago already that this will not get us beyond a minimum threshold, to be honest. So and I think here we figured out yesterday, Anand, we're working together since more than 25 years at this point. Yeah. Partnership is really critical, and developing strategies together also means that you have an understanding for what you're going towards and for the direction that you share. And if I may challenge you there a little bit, Anand, I understand the need for finding a business case for investments, but I know, as a matter of fact, for Shahi and many of our suppliers, it's not only the individual business case. It is also that you have your own sustainability strategy, and having a purpose in your business is also important, obviously. And then having an open conversation about how do we then finance that? Because everything needs to be financed in one way or another. How can we pull resources together? How can we pull learning together? That's how you move from strategy drafting then to the actual implementation. Again, that's where you need partnership. That's where we need to understand how our purchasing practices affect decisions and ultimately impacts in the supply chain, but also vice versa, how knowledge that exists within our supply chain can actually solve these issues, can come up with new ideas. And for example, if to mention that again, many of our suppliers, including Shahi, have their own science-based targets or climate targets actually. And if we then can play a role in actually enabling them to achieve that with our purchasing practices, with funding, and maybe also with a little bit of push in some cases, maybe from our side and the customer demand, that's where we can unfold way more action and impact, rather than coming with, you know, a to-do list to the supply chain in a very, I don't know. We have left that behind us for 20 years ago, I hope.
Well, that was a perfect way of ending this initial conversation. I'm sure we can do more, but considering the time, we will go ahead. So thank you very much, both Enric and Anand. So if we can go to the next slide, please. So we now have a few minutes for a Q&A, and I'm aware that we have a special guest online who has prepared a question for our speaker, Sophia Young of Trading Change, a young-led ethical fashion organization working at the intersection of climate, gender, and radical justice, in alignment with the necessary transition to a circular economy. Sophia, welcome, and thank you for joining us. Please ask your first question.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Federica, and also thank you to Anand and Hendrik for the great responses. My first question is as follows. Youth are one of the largest demographics of fashion consumers and also creators rising on this planet, with more youth than ever before participating in the slow, unconscious fashion movement. What nodes of investment and support do you see the industry moving towards to provide support for the next generation of fashion leaders?
Hendrik, you want to start, or?
As you like. So I'm not sure if I fully understood the question, or I think but there are so many aspects and components to it. First of all, we can definitely see a move or changes in the consumption patterns for especially younger consumers in some geographies, actually, where actually, for example, access to resale pre-loved items is a growing trend that we can see. That has a market significance, actually. What exactly that means, we don't know for sure, but obviously it's something as a fashion brand you want to enable and make those choices easy for those customers, actually. At the same time, we can see that this is maybe not the same picture in all geographies. We can see that especially growing middle classes in, for example, India, but also other parts of the world, have, maybe for the first time in, or the first generation in their family that has access to the financial means and also to the same influences, so to say, that lead them to wanting to enjoy fashion in similar ways as we've maybe done in other parts of the world. So that is something we need to enable without adding extra resource constraints on the planet. And that's a tough challenge, to be honest. So we will see continued growth and demand for fashion. We saw that before in the introduction as well. But it's our challenge as companies and brands to make this possible for these people to do that and enjoy fashion, but decoupled from natural resource constraints, and probably in new ways that mean a different flow of products, actually. For example, multiple transactions, as we would call it, behind one product that has multiple users within the usage system. And at the same time, we see also that with that, probably the skills needed and the jobs in our industry will change. Anand mentioned that you have 120,000 people working in the company that today largely produce garments. That we will need for a long time, but the requirements and the needs might change as we move to a more circular setup of our industry. And this is something we have to manage and bring people with us to not leave people behind, basically, especially the young people in that generation in those parts of the world, actually. I'm not sure if that's answering your question, but I hope, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Sophia, for the question. I think that I'll answer this slightly differently, kind of more from, the manufacturing Shahi perspective. I think that the next generation of fashion leaders, the way that a company like Shahi could kind of provide support, or the way that we do currently provide support, it tends to be through working with innovators who tend to be younger folks who have a lot of purpose-driven motivation to solve the big problems that this industry has created. And I think there's a lot of really interesting stuff out there. I would even say that, according to some people, a lot of the technological solutions for the problems we face exist. They're out there. The challenge can sometimes actually be the business models. So that's been, something we're learning more and more about as we, tap into all of this sustainable or sustainability innovation. And then aside from that, I think Shahi over the years has been able to, work really closely with universities and academia. And through that industry and academia collaboration, we have been able to, for example, host internships, work with independent researchers. And I think that's definitely allowed us to, gain a lot of perspectives, gain a lot of learnings, and in some sense, actually develop programs and implement new programs, both on the social and environmental side.
Thank you, Sophia and Hendrik. Actually, we have also some questions from the audience, and I would like to ask, we have not much time, so let me select this one that I think can also add more on our discussion, which is a single load of polyester clothing can spill 700,000 microplastic fibers that can reach the food chain. What solution does the fashion sector identify?
Shall I take that one?
Yeah, sure, definitely. It's a tough one.
please fill in. Yes, it is a tough one, to be honest. And so where we are today is, I think we all acknowledge the issue of microfiber shedding. To come up with really workable solution, we need more research and science to identify what solutions this could be, actually. So we're looking at a whole range of different solutions that could be end of pipe, like fixing the washing machine, basically, to the material coating, for example, that could prevent microfiber shedding, to, what are different types of materials, and actually the extent of microfiber shedding. So we are, I think, behind the scenes elaborating with a lot of different solutions there, while we still have to identify more substantial scientific knowledge about the sources and most suitable solutions to address that challenge. That's the short version of a very complex issue.
Yeah, I think that's well said, and I don't have much to add except that we're just learning about this topic, us as Shahi. We haven't done much about it yet. But one of the things I found out recently, and there are organizations out there like Forum for the Future that are conducting research on this. But I found out that the microfiber issue is not just an issue. It's an issue with natural fibers as well. So cotton fiber and so on. So I think, a lot of challenges for us to address going forward.
Thank you both, and I'm glad that we had also the audience question into the conversation, but I also know that Sophia has one more question for you guys. So Sophia, would you like to take the floor again?
Yes, absolutely. And also thank you so much to the both of you for that response to the previous question. I think it's great and inspiring to know that there's different nodes of support for young people and that recognition for that, not only with the leaders of tomorrow, but also the leaders of today. So the second question I have is a big criticism for the fashion industry is desire to move fast, that is, towards new technologies and innovating circular materials, but failing to properly compensate workers, providing living wages, and also make fashion fair. After your attendance at previous climate conferences, alongside your experience in the fashion world, how do you think we can achieve a balance between technological innovation and also human innovation in the fashion industry?
Yeah. Hendrik, I can start this time. You've been starting on the last few questions. I think that, as we transition towards circular business models, the concern, as far as I understand, is that the existing job quality issues can worsen. So, this transition, if it's not, well thought out, can leave behind marginalized groups if we don't actively make an effort to prepare for the new job roles that the circular economy will need. So we're talking about, recycling and new economies, but sometimes there's a lack of discussion of working conditions and well-being within this context. So, I think that it's clear that we need to think about a just transition. We need to see how, decarbonizing and setting environmental targets around circularity, how these things will impact people's lives and jobs. And I think, there's an opportunity actually to invest in social innovation, which is something, we're doing a lot of here at Shahi.
Well, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you all very much again to Sophia, Nant, and Hendrik. And I would suggest then to move on to the next slide, please. Because I would like now pass the word first to Mr. Luca Manesini, member of the Committee of the Region and President of the Province of Lucca, Italy, European Commission for short policy intervention. Mr. Manesini, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Federica. It's a pleasure for me to participate on this debate. In the upcoming years, circular and sustainable textile will be one of the ambitious goals the European Union will work on. Up to now, the textile system has worked on and thrived in the linear economy context characterized by the inefficient use of resources and its negative impact on climate and environment. The time has come for the textile system to undertake the transition towards a regenerative and circular model too. Local governments play a key role to deliver climate neutrality and turn ambitions into reality. They are the perfect level to pilot waste prevention and management schemes, promote reuse initiative, and gather its citizens around socially and environmentally sustainable projects. The European Committee of the Region supports the transition to a circular textile sector. First, it calls for design for circularity to become a widespread reality. Second, it is necessary that the textile and clothing products on the European Union market are durable and recyclable, composed largely of recycled fibers, free of dangerous substances, and produced in compliance with social and environmental rights. Third, the extended responsibility of the producer will play a crucial role in helping the transition, as it has proved effective in improving the separate collection of waste and its management. Last but not least, the strategy aims to promote a transition that is environmentally and socially sustainable, a strategy that is inclusive, fair, and do not leave anyone behind. There is not climate neutrality without climate justice. At this stage, it is important to work together to make textile and in particular fashion more sustainable and circular. Starting from production and consumption patterns, we need to rethink and readapt. To this extent, the consultation launched by Global Fashion Agenda and the United Nations Environment Programme will consent to collect producers' inputs capitalize on good practices and develop policies for a sustainable and circular fashion industry. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Menecini. And I will now pass back to Elisa Tonda. Please, Elisa, next slide, please.
Thank you very much, Federica. And let me start by congratulating you and the speakers for the amazing session, and to Federica, to you, to the amazing moderation that we had today. It was really a very, very entertaining discussion in which we really have learned a lot. And I just want to share with you some of the elements that really resonated with me. I've heard a strong call for collaboration, for getting together to address a challenge that we want all to be part of the solution for. I've heard also a word that was repeated in a few instances is one around trust, bringing all the actors of the value chain together in a context where we can build trust and we can share experience among those participants. And I've also focused on few elements that are a little bit of a recommendation to us as we're entering this process of consultation. I've heard a call for helping create global alignment, helping create a common language, helping create clear guidance behind the targets. And doing this, being very mindful that we will have at time the need to adapt this to the context in which operations are happening. And what will certainly be helpful for us going forward is to keep in mind that whatever we'll be doing will have a strong science and evidence-based foundation for this to be credible. So I've gathered quite some interesting tips from our 1 hour conversation that will help us going forward. And Federica, our joint consultation will really be very fundamental to help us understand what already exists, what has been achieved, but also it will help us understand what is possible, what are the possibilities, and where we can throw our heart with ambition and where we can get there. And it will be very essential when thinking through what is going to happen to really make sure that we give a space for all voices to be heard and to influence and inspire our thinking, so that what we get to at the end is really something that is inclusive and owned as much as possible. And if I may, I'm just going to add my voice to really invite everybody who wants to be part of this co-creation process to join the consultations. I'm sure in the chat box you have already seen the link, and I'm sure the link to see when those consultations will be happening and how to participate will be again in the chat for all participants, because this is really only through your voice and through your engagement that the outcome of this consultation process will really be successful. And again, let me conclude also by thanking everybody who has been with us for this 1 hour, for having also engaged in the conversation with their questions, with their perspectives. And Federica, I'm handing back to you.
Wonderful, Elisa. Thank you very much, and thank you all indeed. The one also online that are following us, and the participants and the questions. A global fashion agenda, we look forward to capturing the broader industry insights in the survey and the workshop. And you have the opportunity to share your insights with us until February next year. Afterwards, our team will analyze the inputs and present the first finding, aggregated and anonymized back to all of who participated and publicly. And then during our next Global Fashion Summit in Copenhagen in spring, actually will be summer by then next year, because we just announced it that will be in June, we'll look forward to publishing the new Fashion CEO agenda that will include the industry targets coming forth from this consultation. And with this, I call on you as fashion leaders to play a role in shaping robust targets for the industry to accelerate progress and strive towards our vision of a net positive fashion industry for the people and the planet. Thank you all.